Hey there, everybody. A couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago maybe, I had disrupted a whole bunch of Celastris orbiculatus. This guy. It's the Asiatic bittersweet. It's impactful in gardens in New England. And I was thinking about other ways that I could smother it and blunt its impact. And in thinking about these options for getting rid of it and reducing the prevalence and presence of this plant in our woodlot, I got to thinking about how I think about it. And my concern in this is that the way that I'm thinking about plants is unnecessarily limiting how I go about managing those plants that I'm thinking about. And so we're going to try a little thought experiment today. I'm going to say a word. I want you guys to just feel your feelings about those words, right? Think of an example of it in your own life or your own garden. Think about how it feels to you, but we're really thinking about our emotions on this one. This is kind of a theme on this channel, I guess, is the intellectual breakdown of the way that we feel as we're doing our garden management and maintenance and design work. And I think that all of those things, our feelings, that is, are hugely important in this. But the way that we approach challenges with our language, and this is true in, I think, any language that is spoken, written, or conceptual. So when I say the word weed, as in like a garden weed, we think, oh, it's a bad plant. The word weed has negatively charged emotional value, right? Even the more gentle descriptions of a weed, as in the wrong plant in the wrong place at the wrong time, assumes a lot of wrong in it. It's a very much emotional value judgment type of call. And I think that when we start getting into adverbs for those adjectives, like a bad plant or a weed, I think that's when we start really challenging ourselves. So, sure, we have weeds. It's the wrong plant in the wrong place at the wrong time. And then we have things like pernicious weeds. And the word pernicious on its own just has a negative connotation. That's what the word is. It's mean-spirited or aggressive and tenacious in its pursuit of adverse results. And it's a plant. It's trying to grow and propagate itself in the same way that we try to grow and propagate ourselves, only with different types of inputs and successional strategies. And so to assume or to assign any kind of emotional judgment on the part of the plant gives us a pre-selected set of options with which to deal with this plant. And so, in the case of Oriental bittersweet, or the Asiatic bittersweet, It's a terrible plant. It kills forests. It's tree murdering. It's all of these things. But what are the functions that it is performing in these degraded landscapes in which we find it constantly? And one could say that it is effective in reshuffling the successional order of a space which has either fallen into disrepair or into monoculture or has a poor balance of things. And so it's a resetter of forests. Things that have too little organic matter in the soil, or locations that maybe have far too much shade and are a monoculture, similar to what our woodlot would be if we were not promoting all of these deciduous trees that have a lower percentage of representation in our woodlot. And so if we think negatively about these things, we're going to think about strategies to remove it, or to kill it, or to cut its particular function that it is performing out of the system as a whole. But by virtue of doing that removal or that destructive act, we are opening the niche back up for either the same plant to overtake it again, or for a plant with different behaviors to take hold. Some of those are going to be in line with our design goals, and some of them are going to be out of line or out of character with our design goals. And so I think that in order for us to be the most effective managers of a natural space or a naturalized space, in order to understand the system's functioning on its own, I think we need to occasionally perform this thought experiment where we do away with these emotionally charged adjectives for plants. What can we say instead? We have a fast-growing, well-situated, vining plant that grows upward at a fast rate, in addition to growing horizontally at a high rate. Is we can provide a native opportunity or a native individual back to that space and provide a better running start for that plant in order to hopefully outcompete the plant that is not in sync with our design. We can blanket it with material or individuals that are not conducive to its long-term successional strategy. So in the case of this wood pile here, what we could do is cover it with low-growing vegetative matter that is not going to enable the bittersweet to advance into the lower canopies here, and we can manage it there. It may still pull some of that herbaceous perennial vegetation down with it. So if we choose things that are prolific or high-speed rooters, or form adventitious roots along their base, they may be better situated to handle that niche that we are trying to overfill with competitive species for the thing that we have found out of step with our design. And so I want you guys, if you're into this, think about some of the plants that are, to your perception, working against your plan. And then once you have one or two of them, think very dispassionately about how they are behaving in your system. I think that there's value in that to just observe without an emotional attachment to the garden, even if it's just for a momentary thing, and then you're like, I hate this bittersweet, I'm going to tear it all out. That's okay. The important part is thinking about its form and function in your garden, and thinking about management strategies beyond removal or smothering that are more of a creative aspect of the design rather than a deleterious or destructive part of the design. Just like everything else that we do plant-wise in our site, everything is deposition. So when we are finding a group of plants that are not in line with our goals for a particular room in our forest or a particular section of that space, we will build on top of those things so that we can favor the plants that seem to best fit our design and goals, and mesh best with the strategy of material deposition on top of the decaying plant matter from which we hope to fertilize the rest of the system as it grows in. So what we are doing is planting native pumpkins into this space, as well as I have a few woody perennials up in the greenhouse that have rooted successfully, and I'm going to transplant a selection of those down here. My intention is that because these are likely to tip root and layer themselves and are likely to bend under the weight of any bittersweet that does get missed or unmanaged in this system, the weight of those will pull the propagating material back down to give me another plant that is conducive to our plan, while we are introducing additional native species into our plan, and the food-bearing aspects of these plants during the course of this season, as well as the additional vegetative propagation material, means that I will have a greater incidence of management interactions in this particular space that I can utilize for removing the unwanted plant material and supporting the wanted plant material. And if I hadn't been thinking about more constructive ways to deal with this plant that works against me in my heart of hearts, I would not have come to these types of solutions and thinking about how it is going to interact with things other than it's going to be bad and it's going to take over. And so these types of language barriers that we create in ourselves by not viewing things as dispassionately as we are capable of, leads us into these closed, dead-end loops of management that leads to fatigue, that leads to a defeated sense of self, and the sense that, like, I'm never going to win against these weeds. If I turn the camera here, you can see this space here is the one that we're working on, but this one up here is just overrun with bittersweet. And even that word, myself, right now, talking about this consciously with you folks, I say overrun, and that's an emotionally charged word. I would say that if I were being smarter about this and being true to the thought experiment, I would say that bittersweet has successfully overtaken the negative space afforded it in that garden area after the tree fall that caused me to delay and divert management time from that space. And so nature doesn't stop. There is something that feels the need to take over that spot and provide root exits to the soil below and green vegetative cover to the soil on top, and more and more biological processes. And the most suited for that task in this time has been the bittersweet, and there will have to be a reckoning for it between it and I in order for that space to be as productive as I feel it can be for our design and for the local fauna. But at the moment, I think my best task would be to manage small portions of it while introducing additional plant material that is able to follow these archetypes that I am thinking of, namely brambles and preferably less thorny but stoloniferous growers that will pull over with the weight of the bittersweet and root themselves, as opposed to allowing it to step up into the canopy and cause potential damage to other trees. So I hope that gives you folks a way to approach some of these opportunities in your own gardens for reset or a reconfiguring of speciation. And I would love to hear some other examples if you have found this to be the case in your own lives. What are some chances or opportunities that you've been able to seize on because you took the time to disconnect the emotionally charged language from what you were observing? Drop us a line in the comments. I wanted to get back into the gardens with you folks. Stop talking about work because I'm going crazy. But yeah, let me know what you guys are thinking about in regards to this, or the greenhouse project, or the nursery stuff. Is there something that you'd like to see a little bit more of, or should I just shut up and talk about plants? Anyway, it's going to do it for us today, folks. Hope you're all well. Hope your gardens are thriving. I hope you find myriad opportunities to tweak your design closer to the ideal that you know it can be. Till next time, thanks for watching. Happy planting.